It's been a while since we've last talked about Rick and Morty, hasn't it? When it came out in 2013, it was seen as a breath of fresh air. It was released into a sea of cookie-cutter adult animation. With few exceptions, it was always the same thing. Some kind of Family Guy or South Park clone with terrible animation that constantly made sex jokes and tried to be as edgy as possible. Rick and Morty stood apart from the competition. I want to say that it had more thought-provoking scenarios or more endearing characters than your typical adult animated sitcom. I want to say that, but I can't say that because it's not true. Rick and Morty, simply put, is better than Family Guy clones, not because the characters are more endearing or it's better animated or that it avoids gross out. Rick and Morty is a better show simply because it puts more effort into it than Family Guy or South Park's clones. This isn't Futurama, or anything that actually does delve into realistic depictions of philosophy, and has a major background in science and science fiction. Remember back during season 1 and 2 of Rick and Morty? Most of the episodes were about movie parodies. The episode I reviewed, Lawnmower Dogs, despite its name, rings a lot closer to Planet of the Apes, and A Nightmare on Elm Street, and of course, Inception. There's also Jurassic Park, The Purge, and so on. Even when their episodes didn't just fall down to movie parodies, it was always a simple concept. Aliens that implant false memories. A love potion. Hive minds. The show would take these simple premises and then run with them. And what they did with them, the jokes they came up with, were far more interesting and inventive than the basic ideas that formed each episode. Now, I'm not saying this to be offensive or to demean Rick and Morty. There is absolutely nothing wrong with a simple show. Let me repeat that. There is absolutely nothing wrong with a simple show. Some of the greatest shows of all time are simple shows. Some of my favorite shows of all time are simple. Samurai Jack is a simple show. Jack must get back to the past to stop the evil wizard. Simple. Ed, Edd, and Eddy is simple. 3 kids try to scam their neighbors out of money so they can buy candy. Rick and Morty is about a genius scientist doing whatever the fuck he wants and dragging his naive grandson around. Simple. Something changed about Rick and Morty since the last time that I reviewed it. The first 2 seasons were all well loved by fans, and cemented it as one of the defining adult cartoons of its era, alongside its contemporary BoJack Horseman. Then season 3 came along. Whatever reputation that Rick and Morty had started to dissipate, and it dissipated quickly. More and more these days, Rick and Morty is a joke among the general internet. And not a funny one either. The kind of joke that gets arrested at a McDonald's.
Wait, you guys have no Szechuan sauce? No. I want Szechuan sauce! Where's my Szechuan sauce? I'm Pickle Rick!
You've probably seen the videos of Rick and Morty fans demanding Szechuan sauce, yelling about pickles, and leaving copy pastas everywhere.
To be fair, you have to have a very high IQ to understand Rick and Morty. The humor is extremely subtle, and without a solid grasp on theoretical physics, most of the jokes will go over a typical viewer's head.
To be fair, it takes a very high IQ to understand that copy pastas are the lowest form of humor, and using one puts your intelligence on par with a spam email bot, with only negative things to give the rest of society, because it's basically an admission that you don't really understand the concept of humor. But this is a very high IQ audience, I believe. With the fandom's reputation sinking, a lot of people became harsher towards the show itself. But that can't be the full story. I mean, a bad fandom doesn't make a show bad, and lots of other shows have obnoxious memes. SpongeBob has had a million memes, some of them are bound to have missed the mark at some point. But, the only thing that I can think of that comes close to the reputation of Rick and Morty memes, in the realm of animation at least, is the Naruto run, but that doesn't really have anything to do with animation or even Naruto specifically. Something happened in season 3 of Rick and Morty. To put it simply, the show started to suck. And not just a little bit either, but it sucked hard. Before I get complaints, not every single episode of the 3rd season was off. The opener was pretty damn good, and the Rick Lantis mix-up is an amazing episode, probably the best of the entire show. But it's hard to argue that there weren't far more misses than hits this season. The other episodes ranged from forgettable to memorable for the wrong reasons. From just okay to so bad that even the show's creators more or less disowned them. Honestly, I could have picked almost any episode of season 3 to go after. Vindicators, the ABCs of Beth, the mediocre finale, Rick mancing the stone. Hell, I wish I could be reviewing Get Swifty, which was my go-to awful episode that spawned an obnoxious meme before Pickle Rick came along. The biggest problem with the episode is...
I'm Pickle Rick!
The biggest problem with the episode is...
I'm Pickle Rick!
The biggest problem with the episode is...
I'm Pickle Rick!
The biggest problem with this episode is very simple. Pickle Rick's simple problem is that it's not simple. I've actually been trying to analyze why Season 3 of Rick and Morty ended up so bad. It shouldn't be so hard to take science fiction concepts and then just joke about them. And then I realized, in Season 3, Rick and Morty stopped doing that. Rick Mancing the Stone is not making fun of a Mad Max future, or having any fun with a Mad Max future. It's a character study of Summer and how she's doomed to repeat her mother's marital mistakes. It goes out of its way, specifically to be not fun. Vindigators 3 isn't a big fun superhero time, it's about how the idea of the superhero is a lie, and they'd actually be shitty celebrity people. Great analysis, guys. It's not like we haven't been hearing that since 2008.
Along comes Hancock.
I don't even remember that.
The ABCs of Beth isn't about exploring a childhood wonderland turned perverted. It's about Beth's annoying family issues. Let me ask you this. What if we had an episode of Ed, Edd and Eddy where, after failing to scam the kids again, the Eds got in trouble and we got to see the abusive home lives that each of them had? It'd be very deep. It had character analysis. It'd be story-driven. And it would be absolutely horrible. It would ruin the show. And it's a reason that they left that kind of stuff for the finale movie, because the longer an injury or consequence lasts, the less funny that it can be. Ed, Edd and Eddy is a simple show that was not designed to hold up heavy character weight and deep analysis, so it didn't. And you know what other show falls right into that category? Rick and Morty. And despite not really being able to hold any sort of depth, Rick and Morty has been digging so deep that it's basically hit the septic tank. Pickle Rick is what happens when you take a simple show that was not designed to hold up to heavy character weight and deep analysis, and you put both of those things in it. And you screw the pooch as well. It is currently my least favorite episode of the show, which is actually saying something when I get more and more selection to choose from. Someone once said that a house divided against itself cannot stand. Not sure who, I think it was Domokan. And a house divided against itself is a very good way of describing Pickle Rick. It's divided into two halves, neither of which are good. The A-plot is about Rick turning himself into a pickle and going on an adventure full of ultra-violence.
Big reveal, I'm a pickle. What do you think about that? I turned myself into a pickle!
That the show already did and did much better during Look Who's Purging Now, and even that was one of the lesser episodes of Season 2. The other half is the family going to a therapist in the most tedious fucking television that I have ever seen in my life.
It's not my job to take sides or pass judgment. Do you think when your father asks for that syringe, you could ask him...
He won't have to ask for it, okay? He won't need it. He'll just make more. He doesn't need anything from anyone.
You admire him for that.
And both of these plots make the other one worse. Let's start with the obvious problem, and that's with the tone. Personally, I wish 22-minute cartoons didn't have subplots. If your story doesn't have enough meat for a full 22 minutes, bite the bullet and become a show with 2 11-minute segments per episode. Especially when they only come together at the end like this one. Or even worse, when they never come together at all except for a gag, like The Simpsons and Family Guy are prone to do. But let's say you gotta have a subplot instead of a story worth 22 minutes. The two stories should be about something similar. That's my A standard. You get an A for doing that. A C standard, a passing grade, is having them balance each other out. And upon first glance, it looks like the two plots here do that. The Pickle Rick segment of the episode is fast-paced and filled with intense action and hardcore brutality. It could actually be quite gross, seeing Rick bite the head off of a cockroach. It would be nice to have a bit of a break from that. And the therapist storyline does do that. It's slow and quiet and tedious. The problem is that it's too slow and quiet and tedious. It's like being on a vehicle that goes 60 miles per hour, and then it just stops. When Rick is going fast and hardcore as he is, and we cut to the therapist segments feel twice as slow. The therapist segments drag in isolation with Wong's droning voice, but it is even more of a slog to get through in between Rick's action scenes. These two pieces do not go together, and for more obvious reasons than just the tonal problems, which I think most audience members picked up on. Like I said earlier, if the two plots are about something similar, it's doing what subplots are supposed to do. Pickle Rick is about himself turning into a pickle. Why did he turn himself into a pickle?
I'm just trying to figure out why you would do this. Why anyone would do this.
The reason anyone would do this, if they could, which they can't, would be because they could, which they can't.
Okay, what is the therapist part of the episode about? Oh, explaining Rick and why he does what he does, and really analyzing his character. You cannot have one half of an episode that says, don't think about this, while the other half says, Really think about what this guy does. Look deep into his character. Meanwhile, this guy, the smartest guy in the universe, has turned himself into a pickle. Rather than, I don't know, walking down the street and hiding in a fucking bush. Sure, Rick likes to overcomplicate things, but there is no logical reason that would specifically turn himself into a pickle rather than something more practical. And I could ignore the lack of logic if the episode wasn't trying to make me examine his life logically.
Stop digging for hidden layers and just be impressed. I'm a pickle.
I was gonna do that until this episode brought up the point that I should analyze how you tick. Why does Rick do the things that Rick does? That is what this episode is about. It's like a murder mystery story showing a dead body, analyzing how the guy was killed, but then just telling you that it doesn't matter that the guy was killed. Let's just go get drinks. But I actually think that I'm being a little bit harsh and a little bit of shouting. I should not be so harsh in this episode, because it was a terrible idea and there was no way to make it work to begin with. Some people say that there's no such thing as a bad idea. Pickle Rick actually dissects that sentiment, and it proves that yes, there is a such thing as a bad idea that should never have been attempted. And that is trying to psychoanalyze Rick. Or any of the Sanchez's, really. This might have been lost on the writers at some point and to the general audience, but Rick Sanchez is an awful person. Not an awful character, but an awful human being. This has been established since the pilot, where Rick kidnapped his grandson and forced him to shove giant seeds up his ass. But all of the Sanchez's are pretty terrible people. Even someone like Morty, who the show has made repeated efforts to show others dying due to his naivety. Look, when you turn an entire global population into Cronenbergs because you are horny, you are not a good person anymore. And of course, we can't forget all the destruction that Morty caused in Morning Night Run, trying to get Fart to his home world. And you know what's a major pain in the ass? Rick and Morty keeps trying to make me care and feel about these people. These awful, sadistic, evil people. I don't give a shit who Rick is as a person. And here's the funny thing. I only enjoy Rick and Morty because I don't give a shit who Rick is as a person. It only works because you're not examining and thinking about the implications of everything these people do. If you give an explanation as to why Rick does what he does and who he really is, you ruin the shtick. It's like a magic trick. If you explain how it works, it no longer works as a magic trick.
Is this the first part of some kind of magic trick?
I don't do magic, Morty. I do science. One takes brains, the other takes dark eyeliner.
Before this episode, the show repeatedly went out of its way to show that you should not give a shit about Rick as a person. Remember the Season 2 finale, how Rick seemed to sacrifice everything to get thrown into an intergalactic prison? Season 3 came along, and it's revealed that he did that just to get Jerry thrown out of Morty's life. Like, the Season 3 opener goes out of its way to explain that you're not going to get anything about who Rick is. Any sort of believable motive to anything is only going to be a joke. Rick being motivated by Szechuan sauce is so much more in line with the show and what makes the show work than explaining all of this therapist bullshit. I mean, for starters, it's a hell of a lot more believable than this mumbo-jumbo pseudoscience. And you know what? Yes, there is definitely room for analysis when it comes to villains or anti-heroes or other dark characters in media. There can definitely be intrigue when it comes to explaining a villain's motive. The only issue is that you can't make it funny. Good thing that Rick and Morty isn't a comedy, I guess. Otherwise, it'd be fucking aggravating every single time the show decides to not be funny to go into family drama. And here's the problem with Rick. We already know his motive. We knew it from episode 1. He's a nihilist. Nothing in life matters to him. That's how he works and why he's able to do many of the horrible things that he does. He comes off as the only sane man because the show has repeatedly established through its first 2 seasons that meaning and reason, you know, what Dr. Wong here is trying to inject into the show, will only get you more misery, and it's better to not interfere at all. And I can tell that they're trying to get Rick to actually care about things and people, despite mocking him ever being able to. They've yanked the audience's chain on that one like 5 times so far. Here's the sad irony of this matter. If Rick ever does succeed in caring about things again, great, the show is over. Rick and Morty abandoned their original world. While Morty was affected by it, Rick did not give a shit. You can't really make me feel that he cares and loves about his family after that, can you? He left that version of Beth to die because he has access to infinite versions of her. Why would I care about how he feels about the therapy in this episode? I mean, granted, Beth is just about the worst person in the world, and I'd be fine with leaving her to die as well. Okay, this is another thing that absolutely needs to be said. Fuck Beth, and fuck Jerry, but especially fuck Beth. To death. Fuck them to death.
Please, I can't. No, please, no, no. No.
It's called Rick and Morty. That is what I want to see. Or Rick and Morty in Sometime Summer. That's what the Season 3 opener promised, but no, it's going into Beth and Jerry's marital shit. Beth and Jerry should not be on the show, ever. I do not give a shit about their marital problems. And I don't know anybody else who does either. Every single time they are on the screen, I want to punch the damn thing. is antithetical to the strengths of Rick and Morty. It's like trying to make Ren and Stimpy a melodrama. Beth is just the worst. Her denial of reality isn't funny or endearing, it's problematic. I've heard the writer's defense for filling season 3 with so much Beth and Jerry bullshit was because it's real. Yes, because we were absolutely asking for reality in our science fiction show about a drunk scientist fighting against the devil, making potions that turn people into mantises and fucking giraffes. I watch this kind of show for hard, gripping, real-life drama, and I guess the fucking the giraffes are just there because. Distance from reality is what Rick and Morty should be going for, not proximity to reality, because if you have to think about the implications of the show, you couldn't enjoy it. Rick has an entire universe enslaved to power his car. When that's his setup, why would I care about how he feels about his daughter? And my god, if that wasn't bad enough, it's how whiny Beth is. Every line of dialogue, in this episode specifically, is just fucking hell. Can I see that moment from the season 3 opener when Beth was exploded as a kid? This is the most heartwarming moment of the show. It's the only time it ever made me feel the warm fuzzies. Oh, what? Was that too dark for you? Okay, let's go back to the show where one of the main characters is willing to nonchalantly commit genocide, and we're supposed to feel for him. What I'm saying is that Rick and Morty ain't Nolan, or at least it shouldn't be. You know that moment where Rick is sitting in the therapist's office being talked at?
Rick, the only connection between your unquestionable intelligence and the sickness destroying your family is that everyone in your family, you included, use intelligence to justify sickness. You seem to alternate between viewing your own mind as an unstoppable force and as an inescapable curse.
And I think it's because the only truly unapproachable concept for you is that it's your mind within your control.
Worst moment of the show. I mean, for starters, it feels like a self-insert fanfiction by someone who doesn't know how to write. Or at the very least, doesn't know how to restrain themselves when they write. It is one of the biggest mistakes that I've ever seen in anyone's writing. I mean, let's start with the bare basics. Show, don't tell. This is taking that statement and setting it on fire. But no, let's give the audience our Word document as to how Rick should be written. Isn't this the kind of stuff fans find fun to figure out for themselves anyway? Doesn't it take away the magic if the show just gives you all of the answers? Like explaining what's in the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. The mystery is where the fun is. I mean, not that this is the answer to that mystery anyway. This is just some pretentious bullshit that amounts to nothing. If brushing your teeth is boring, you're doing it wrong. And people apparently really like this moment as a standout of the episode, which, confuses me very much. Let me look it up and figure out why. Oh, apparently people relate to Rick a lot. Damn. Like, throughout this year, I felt some pretty shitty self-loathing, but wow, the people who relate to Rick, they've got me beat. They find themselves relating to a person who abandoned their own family, repeatedly leaves people to die, is constantly selfish, allows untold tragedy to happen just to get it through his grandson's head that nothing matters, and only trying to help will cause tragedy, is more than willing to murder, turn people into body horror monstrosities and didn't give much of a care about it, and is willing to enslave an entire universe to power up his car. Like, I've definitely never met you, but if you feel so terribly about yourself that you actually find kinship with Rick Sanchez, good God, I hope you feel better soon, man. I could not imagine how bad that must feel, to just hate yourself so fucking much that you relate to one of the most awful, horrendous people in media. I don't know who you are, but you're better than that. You are better than Rick Sanchez. He's not a character who's meant to be relatable. He's not meant to be related to. The show continually goes out of its way to show that he is an awful person, that he is a sociopathic asshole. I don't know what to tell you. After the Rick Shank redemption, the boat on caring for Rick as a person has long since passed, and luckily season 4 tends to be toning that bullshit back. I can't say it's as good as seasons 1 and 2, many of the episodes seem to just be random events strung together, but anything is better than the mess of this, the pseudo-intellectual bullshit. Instead of, oh, Rick is a misunderstood blah 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 and we should care where he goes, we have him messing with Morty's existential perception of reality because Morty insulted his vat of acid plan. One final thing about the therapy scene, it's actually a pretty offensive portrayal of therapy. And not just because of the poop eating shit. No, our therapist here, Dr. Wong, psychologically corners people to meet her own perceptions of their reality, which is psychologically abusive and not what therapists do. In fact, it might be so damaging and demeaning that it might get people to not seek out therapy. Psychologists don't spit out the answers, they help you find the answers to the problems on your own. They usually refrain from giving hard answers and tend to speak more in suggestions. If you're seeing Dr. Wong as any kind of legitimate analysis or help, that's probably another bad thing. Honestly, it's kind of sick for such a portrayal of therapy for a show that's so progressive that it actually had a Gamergate reference in 2020. And, went on and on about how they hired so many female writers to be diverse before they proceeded to make the worst season of the show, and several memes that shut the general audience's perception of it to zero. I'm not saying that hiring female writers is why the show got bad at all. Not at all. I'm saying it's a very bad look to celebrate bringing female writers on board, talking it up and up and up, and then ending up making atrocities like Pickle Rick, or most of the rest of Season 3. If anything, it was inexperience that caused Season 3 to be so terrible, which is bound to happen when you hire a bunch of new writers of any gender, as the ones who have remained are much better writers now. While not every single episode of Season 4 is my favorite, I can't say that I actively hated any of them. At least nowhere near as much as Pickle Rick. And I know that I'm not the only one who hates this episode. It's a pretty strange way to start off this unpopular opinions marathon. But Pickle Rick also does tend to be quite loved. It has passionate people on both sides. So, allow me to make it up to you guys. Next time we're doing Your Name, the highest grossing anime film and the most beloved work of Makoto Shinkai, who has been lauded as the next Miyazaki.